Hello everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. Welcome back. I hope that you are all well, and if you are new, please hit subscribe and stick around. As many of you already know, I like to highlight Canadian literature, or CanLit as we call it, and I tend to read a lot of Canadian literature. At least I think I do, until I come across lists like the one that CBC Books put out recently, which was a list of 30 Canadian writers to watch in 2022. I will leave a link to that article in the description box below so you can check that out if you are interested. Today I thought that I would go through the list with you. I love learning about new writers, especially, up-and-coming Canadian writers. And out of the 30 Canadian authors on this list, I've only read 2 of them. 12 are on my radar, which means that there are 16 authors, like more than half the list, that are new to me. So I'm going to go through, these fairly quickly, and I'd love to know if you have read any of these authors or if you were aware of any of them, the ones that I haven't been aware of too. So I'm going to start with 2 authors that I have read, and the first is Shueng-King, who was born in Vancouver, raised in Hong Kong, and currently lives in Toronto. And I have read his debut novel, You Are Eating an Orange, You Are Naked, and I became aware of it because it was on the Canada Reads long list in 2021. And the book is a character-driven novel about a couple who they're never named in the book, and it's about the stories that they tell each other while they are traveling together. When I talked about this book in a wrap-up that I did, I said that I would be interested in reading more from this author, and I think he has, potential to give us some really amazing stories. And it turns out that Shueng-King is currently working on his second book, which will be, I think, a collection of short stories. So I will definitely be keeping my eyes open for that. Then the second author, and the only other author that I've read on this list, I can't believe it, is Genki Ferguson. Genki Ferguson was born in New Brunswick, but spent most of his childhood in Japan, where his mother's family lives. And you may know Genki's father, who is the author Will Ferguson. So I just finished Genki Ferguson's debut novel, Satellite Love, a few days ago. And again, I knew about this novel because it had been longlisted for Canada Reads this year, and I'm still deciding how I feel about this book. But I can tell you that it's set in Japan. It's very unique because it's about a relationship between a teenage girl and a satellite, and it explores some heavier topics like loneliness and mental illness, and it does it in a really unique way. So I will be talking about this in my wrap-up at the end of the month. Next are authors who I have their books, but I haven't read them yet. And first is, and I hope I say this name correctly, Cheluchi Onyemelukwe-Onuobia. She lives between Nigeria and Halifax. And I first became aware of her with her debut novel, The Son of the House, which I think I've talked about at least a couple of times on this channel before, because it was shortlisted for the Giller Prize in 2021. And it's on my TBR in a couple of months again. It somehow kind of keeps getting bypassed, so hopefully I will get to this soon. It is about 2 Nigerian women who get kidnapped, and we learn their stories. Kim Fu is the next author that I have a book that I want to read. Kim Fu was born in Vancouver, and I am aware of 3 of her novels. I have The Lost Girls of Camp Forevermore, which is a story about 5 girls that go to camp and it all goes wrong. And then the other book that is on my radar is Kim Fu's debut novel for today, I Am a Boy, which is a coming-of-age story about Peter, who is pretty certain he's a girl. And the third book I'm aware of is Fu's most recent publication, which is Lesser-Known Monsters of the 21st Century. And this is a collection of short stories. Next is an author that I've had their book on my shelf for a while, and that is Aimee Wall, who is from Newfoundland and now lives in Montreal. And Aimee Wall's novel Wee Jane was on the long list for the Giller Prize in 2021. And I've actually started it once and then got sidetracked, but I do want to get back to it because it's probably one of the most timely books, since it is about the topic of women and having access to abortion. So hopefully I will get to this soon. Okay, so up next are the authors that have been on my radar, but I haven't read them yet, and I don't have their books yet. First is a writer who I first became aware of because of Rick McDonald, and that is Jason Purcell, who lives in Edmonton. And I found out is also the co-owner of Glass Bookshop, which is the bookshop that I want to visit, and I especially want to visit with Lindy from Magpie Reads. Their collection of poetry is called Swollening, and it has themes of queerness and illness, and I really want to read it, so maybe I will pick it up at the Glass Bookshop when I get to meet Lindy. So I'm just putting that out into the universe. Maybe it will happen. Next is Fawn Parker, who is based in Toronto and Fredericton, and I'm only aware of her newest novel, which is her third novel. It's called What We Both Know, and it has themes of family dynamics, trauma, memory, and aging. It's supposed to be disturbing, so I'm intrigued to find out what it's all about. Tsering Yangzom Lama is a Tibetan-Canadian author, hope that was right, based in Vancouver, whose debut novel has been making its rounds on BookTube. It's called We Measure the Earth with Our Bodies, and it is about a Tibetan family who goes into exile after China's invasion of Tibet in 1959. Another book that I've seen a number of times on BookTube is Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead, and this is by Emily Austin, who lives in Ottawa. And this is Emily's debut novel, and it sounds very interesting to me. The main character is a 20-something lesbian who can't stop thinking about death, and then she ends up getting a job at a Catholic church by accident. So this just sounds like it will be a bit funny, but it also deals with topics like mental health. The next author, Brian Thomas Isaac, is from the Okanagan Indian Reserve in British Columbia, and I recently became aware of him because his debut novel, All the Quiet Places, was longlisted for Canada Reads this year, and it's a coming-of-age story about Eddie Toma, who is navigating how to live in two different worlds, his life he knows on the reserve and the world of white people. This next author, I'm pretty sure it was Lindy from Magpie Reads that put him on my radar, and that is Conor Kerr, who is Ukrainian and a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. And Kerr's debut novel, Avenue of Champions, much like the previous book that I talked about, is about a young man, in this case Métis, trying to understand his life and systemic racism and intergenerational trauma. I have three more authors from this list that have been on my radar. Tolu Olurontoba, I hope that's correct, is from Nigeria and now lives in BC, and he writes poetry, and the poetry collection that I am aware of is Each One a Furnace, which is about immigration, and it uses the imagery of migratory birds. Another author from Edmonton is Andrew David MacDonald, and his debut novel, When We Were Vikings, has been out for a couple of years now, and why haven't I picked this up? I often ask myself, because the main character sounds exactly like the kind of character that I love. Zelda is a 21-year-old Viking enthusiast who likes rules and order, and in this story Zelda has a mission, and it's to be legendary. So I want to see what this book is all about. The final author that was at least on my radar is Johnny Christmas from Vancouver. Now, the only way I know Johnny Christmas is because he illustrated Margaret Atwood's graphic novels, the Angel Catbird graphic novels, which is about a human catbird superhero. And his newest graphic novel is called Swim Team, and it's about a young black girl who starts at a new school and joins the swim club. So that is the end of the authors that I knew, at least something about. The rest of the authors on this list are brand new to me, so please let me know if you have heard any of them or if you would recommend any of them if you've read their books, because I'd love to know where I should start. So first is Lisa Bird Wilson, who is Métis from Saskatchewan, and her debut novel is Probably Ruby, and it's about a girl discovering her Indigenous identity. And Nada Alicis from Toronto, living in LA, has a debut short story collection out called Bad Thoughts. This looks at various women's lives. Sylvia Moreno Garcia might be someone who will make it into my book pairings. Sylvia is a Canadian writer who was born and raised in Mexico, and her latest novel is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which does a reimagining of the classic The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. So I may need to pair those up. We will see. Vahini Vera is an American-Canadian writer from Saskatchewan. Her debut novel, The Immortal King Rao, explores technological capitalism, and she also has a short story collection coming out next year. All right, next. Please forgive me because I'm not sure how to say this author's name. I'm going to try like Ziran J. Zhao. They are first-generation Chinese immigrants living in Vancouver, and they write YA fantasy. And their debut novel, Iron Widow, features aliens and giant robots. So that's not so much my cup of tea, but I know others who would totally love that kind of thing. Next is another poet, Daniel Sarah Karazik, lives in Toronto, and they write poetry and fiction, including the poetry collection Hungry and the short story collection Faithful and Other Stories. And actually, now that I just saw this again, I actually think I may have seen them on a poetry panel, but I didn't clue in that this was the same person. Okay, so yes, I think I did know about their poetry, and I do want to read it. They also have a new poetry collection called Plenitude, and I think this is on my shelf, actually. It has a lot of themes that I think are important, like oppression and gender. Next, we have a debut memoir from Cody Cayetano from Toronto, of Anishinaabe and Portuguese descent, and he wrote his memoir called Half Bads in White Regalia. And he did this under the mentorship of Lee Miracle, who I've talked about before on my channel, and I absolutely loved. This memoir is about Cody's upbringing and about his parents. His mother was part of the 60s scoop, and his father immigrated from Portugal. So this definitely has my interest. Dan K. Wu lives in Toronto and is the author of Learning How to Love China, and his recent short story collection is called Taobao, which follows characters from different regions of China. So I might check these out just to read more about Chinese culture. Next is Janice Lynn Mather, who is from Vancouver. She rates YA, but I am interested in her most recent publication of short stories, which is her adult literary debut called Uncertain Kin. It follows the lives of girls and women as they deal with profound change. Chelsea Vowell is next, and I'm surprised that I haven't heard her name before, just because of some of the work that she has done. So Chelsea Vowell is a Métis writer, and her most recent publication is a collection of speculative fiction called In Buffalo is the New Buffalo. And this will be for my sci-fi peeps. Next is another debut. This is from Jamie Cha-Yun Liu, who lives in Ottawa. Dandelion is her first novel, and it has themes that I typically read about, like family secrets, migration, isolation, and mental illness. So this is one that I might look into. Next is poet Jillian Zay from Winnipeg, now living in Montreal. And she has written poetry and children's books, and her most recent book is a collection of personal essays, and I think it also has poems, and it's called Quiet Night Think. Another poet, Michael Fraser, is based in Toronto. His third poetry collection has my attention. It's called The Daybreakers, and it is a fictional retelling of Black soldiers' experiences during the American Civil War. So that will be interesting to see how he does that in poetry. Next is a memoir from a poet. Michelle Poirier-Brown has published You Might Be Sorry You Read This, which tells the story of how she discovered her Métis heritage at the age of 38. So that might be worth a read. And the final two authors both immigrated to Canada when they were quite young. Judy I. Lin from Taiwan, and she now lives in the prairies. And her debut novel is called A Magic Steeped in Poison. It's the first of a duology, and this is about a magician and the art of tea making, which actually sounds quite lovely. And the sequel is called A Venom Dark and Sweet, and that is coming out later this month. So I would be interested, I think, in hearing more about this. And if you haven't read it, please let me know. And finally on the list is Chanel M. Sutherland, who now lives in Montreal and immigrated from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And she has won awards for her short stories and is currently writing her first book, which is going to be a collection of short stories that explore the Caribbean immigration experience. So if that is something that interests you, then keep an eye out for that. So that was a lot, but again, it was a huge reminder to me that there are so many writers, in this case Canadian writers, out there that I haven't even heard of, and hopefully now that more of them are on my radar, I will have the opportunity to check them out, at least some of their books, and maybe find a new favorite author, which would be fantastic. So please let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these authors. Were you aware of more of these authors than I was? Do you have some that you would recommend, or are there some that interest you? Are there other authors that are up and coming that you want to give a shout out, that you want people to know about? I'd love to hear all about it, and I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.